good morning, everyone. Welcome to Township Tuesday. I'm excited to see all of your faces here. Thanks for showing up. Before I get started in my presentation today, we're talking about neglected, abandoned properties. But before I dive into that, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa to talk a little bit about updates from Maddit. So take it away, Lisa.
All right, thank you, Maddie. Greatly appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. I just have a quick update. As we talked about in short courses, the CLC renewal. Matt is busy preparing those for all the townships. So if you haven't already, please check your policies to make sure everything is current. If not, if you need to remove or add anything, please do so by emailing us at madditinsurance@mntownships.org, or you can definitely give us a call, and our main phone number is 763, sorry, I have my other number, 763-497-2330. Just ask for Maddit and one of us can assist you. Again, they will be going out via email to the clerks and the treasurers, so make sure your information is updated as well. If you are new, please email either Maddit Insurance or info@mntownships.org so we can get your information in the system. That will come to both Maddit, everybody. So you just need one or the other, and then we can communicate to the appropriate parties. All right, any questions for you or for me? No? All right, well, thank you. I will hand it back over to Maddie. Have a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
Lisa. Thank you. Michael, do you want to give an update from the trainers, please?
Yes, thanks, Maddie. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to mention to you that in June, and this is coming from a request of a lot of townships wanting more CTAS training. So in June, we are going to have right here in St. Michael, in our local office here, we've got some training coming from the Office of the State Auditor coming to you live. We don't have dates and times as of right now. However, by the time we have the next Township Tuesday, we'll have those dates and times for you. We're looking forward to having all of you out here at the St. Michael office to receive that CTAS training. By the way, if you're not currently using CTAS, I'd just like to put a plug in that CTAS is only $300 for a one-time fee. So if you're using QuickBooks or any other type of accounting software and you're paying a monthly subscription for it, more than likely you're paying more than what you need to. So we look forward to having everyone out here coming in June, and more details are coming for that. Any questions, comments, or concerns? All right, thank you, Maddie. Back to you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's dive into our topic today. Again, my name is Maddie Cash. I'm an attorney with the Association of Townships. If you're new here, welcome. But I know many of you have been here before. I see some familiar names, familiar faces. But if you're new, you can ask comments in the chat. I'll go through it if as they're entered. I'll try to answer whatever questions come up in the chat. Otherwise, if it's unrelated or more specific to your township, or just, you think of it later, you can email me. I have my email and phone information at the very end on the last slide. Otherwise, it's on our website. So be sure to ask questions when you have them. There's no such thing as a stupid question, except for those that go unasked. So let's get started. I'm going to share my screen with you today. Share. All right, so you should be able to see my screen. Michael, will you just give me a thumbs up to make sure you can see it?
Yep, we can see it.
Great, thank you. I never know, never know when something's going awry. So first I'll start with updates from Matt. So we have town law review coming up. It's a really great opportunity to hear from attorneys, myself and Graham, but also township attorneys, people who specialize specifically in representing townships, which is something our organization does not do. and they will go over a lot of topics that are really on the minds of townships lately. So I encourage you to at least take a look at what the agenda is going to include. If you're interested, that is on June 5th. It's a Friday, and that is in Otsego. The cost is $75 per officer, but it is so information packed. There's a lot of really good resources, and a lot of great opportunities to talk to a lot of attorneys who specialize in issues that you guys deal with specifically. So I really encourage you to get out there. It's a really great event. Otherwise, our district meetings are coming up in August, so check the website for your district information, where it's at, and when. All of that is on the website for you to take a look at. All right, so let's jump into the fun properties that we all are familiar with. So we're discussing abandoned and nuisance properties today, and more importantly, what you can realistically do about them if you want to. This subject is frustrating because townships are sometimes expected to solve problems that are visible to everyone, but legally belonging to someone else. So you'll hear things like, that place has been sitting empty for years. Kids are always going in and out of there. The roof is collapsed. You know, garbage all over the property. Why doesn't the township do something about this? And the difficult reality is that townships generally can't arrive with equipment and remove and clean up things just because people think it's ugly or people are upset. There are a lot of really important property laws that come into play that you have to be cognizant of and require a lot of procedure. So a property is allowed to be unpleasant or deteriorated and still remain protected private property. At the same time, townships do have some options if they want to intervene in limited ways. And keep in mind, this process is not simple by any means. And at the end of the day, the township doesn't have to do anything at all. But today we're going to talk about where your lines exist if you want to dive into this world. Before I get started, I do want to emphasize that we are dealing with the rights of private property owners, which is a highly protected and highly litigated area of law. So if you do find yourself in a scenario where you're interested in handling one of these properties or dealing with one of these issues that I mentioned, you will need to work closely with your township attorney from the very beginning. It's not something that you can easily do on your own. You will need the advice of a professional, if not multiple professionals, to deal with these properties. Okay, so not every eyesore is a hazard. Just because it's ugly doesn't mean it is a problem. So the first thing I want to address is the difference between an unattractive property and a legally actionable hazard. Many property disputes begin with aesthetics. Somebody complains that it's ugly, that it lowers property value, the grass isn't cut, there's old equipment. Those complaints are legitimate often, and they're legitimate concerns, but they're not automatically hazard property cases. So Minnesota's hazard property law focuses heavily on whether the condition actually creates a danger to public health and safety. The law describes a hazardous property as one that is described here on the screen. Property which, because of inadequate maintenance, deterioration, damage, unsanitary conditions, or abandonment creates a fire hazard or hazard to public health and safety. So first you have to figure out what that means and whether the property falls in line with those definitions. So you'll be working with the county, fire, to figure out whether this is a problematic property. Thinking about this practically, Minnesota courts uphold hazardous buildings when the conditions are similar to like collapsing roofs, deteriorating foundation, broken windows, interior debris, open sewer hazards, things like that. So when a complaint comes in, one of your first questions should really be, what specifically is the safety issue here, what safety problems exist, not do I like what this property looks like. And remember that property rights still exist. Fourth Amendment and related constitutional protections still apply to abandoned properties. Government entry onto private property generally requires consent or legal authority to do so. So that means townships should avoid just saying, well, we should just go look around, take a look at the property, kick things around, see what's in there. That can create a real problem. The simple route is consent from the owner. It should come from someone with authority over the property. Ideally, in writing so that you can show that you had that consent. If consent can't be obtained, then other options involve administrative search warrants, which I'll get into a little bit later. But the larger lesson is really quite simple. Just don't affuse an abandoned appearance with abandoned property rights. All right, hazardous and vacant buildings. So, Minnesota statute for abandoned and dangerous properties is under Minnesota statute 463, specifically sections 0.15 through 0.26. That's the area that discusses hazardous buildings and hazardous property. And when you're dealing with a hazardous property, that's where you will want to look first. You want to read through the statute, make sure you understand what it says and what you're allowed to do to consider something a hazardous building, and what your steps are beyond that. Some authority that's laid out in that statute includes ordering repairs or requiring cleanup, securing the dangerous structure, or in serious cases, demolition. However, this process involves written orders, notice requirements, and likely the court. Many times, not all the time, of course, but many times these property owners are not interested in cleaning up the property. They don't want to do it. They don't want to have to pay for it. So it can be a long and stressful and expensive legal battle if that is the case. So what do you do if you want to take care of this? You don't want to have to go through this legal battle that almost always comes especially when it comes to property that is mental health issues are associated with the landowner, those kinds of things, that can often dive into a very long, expensive problem because it's dealing with a bigger issue than just garbage on the lawn. It's dealing with somebody's mental health and dealing with that first and figuring out how to resolve that. So what do we do beyond that? Nuisances. All right, nuisance enforcement. There are some statutes that allow you to adopt a nuisance ordinance. So Minnesota statute 365.10, it talks about what townships can do at the annual meeting. And under that statute in subdivision 17, the voters can allow the board to pass an ordinance on the issues listed in that subdivision, which includes general welfare. That would be like a nuisance ordinance. Arguably, the board has separate authority to pass a nuisance ordinance under statutes that already declare certain activities to be public nuisances. In Chapter 617, however, those can be more difficult, more complicated, because that chapter is really limited and targeted at specific action, and it requires a lot more procedural work to go through. So work with your township attorney to figure out which route is best for you. Most of the time it's going to be that 365 chapter. Many nuisance ordinances include property maintenance and land use regulations as well, which it can address outdoor storage, which often is the issue when it comes to complaints. People are complaining that this property is ugly. What can we do about it? It has garbage all over the lawn. There's stuff everywhere. It's pouring over into the street, right? That's what people don't like, and that's often how townships will hear about these problems. So Regulations can specify what items can be stored outdoors, the quality, number of items permitted, duration, those kinds of things, and they can differ on location of the property. So that's an option to take a look at with your attorney. Nuisance is, I should define what that is more so, but a nuisance is really anything that is injurious to health or is offensive to the senses or obstructs for use and comfortable use of property. So courts find, well, in Minnesota courts find some circumstances to be nuisances like noise, offensive odor, auto wreckage, hazardous buildings, gases and odors, smoke, pollution, cesspools, animals. If the township has adopted a nuisance ordinance, it can usually investigate the complaints, issue notices, order correction, and seek enforcement if the owner refuses. Now, nuisance ordinances are often the first and least expensive route to handle these problems. However, it is important to point out that when the township does get involved, that it needs to make sure that they have the resources to enforce the ordinance. So staff, attorney fees, experts, they have to pay experts to conduct inspections, hearings, and make sure they can take care of the abatement of nuisance and hazardous conditions. So while there are mechanisms to recover, many townships don't have the funds to make nuisance enforceable or make it a priority. So ordinance and policies that the township will not have the ability to enforce should not be adopted. So make sure you take a look at that and really realistically evaluate your ability to carry those procedures out before you jump into adopting a nuisance ordinance to deal with maybe one problematic property. Because again, you're not required to do this. So you really want to take a step back and evaluate what the value is to the township. Abandoned vehicles, that's often a topic of issue with these properties as well. And there's a separate chapter in Minnesota law that talks about abandoned vehicles, and that's chapter 168. And it talks about specific notice requirements concerning taking vehicles and disposal of vehicles, provided they are either on public or private property. Obviously, it differs if it's on private property than public property, but they can be attractive to children, harbor, pests, and lead to other various concerns. So you do sometimes have the authority to take those into custody under certain conditions. Abandoned vehicles left on public or private property that have no potential for use, junk vehicles, if they're unregistered and only valued at the scrap metal that they're worth, or unauthorized vehicles, if they are in an area they're not supposed to be, you do have the ability to remove those under certain circumstances. You have to provide a lot of notice. So I really encourage you to take a look at that chapter, that 168, because that will talk about what you can do, what notice you have to provide in certain circumstances. All right, when you're taking a look at these issues, investigating, how do you investigate those? So when possible, obviously, written consent is the best way to enter private property. It can be given by the owner or a tenant of the property or by anyone in control of the premises. Consent must be given voluntarily. You can't insist on entering. You can't force them or coerce them into allowing you to enter. But courts have upheld searches when individuals provide kind of like a welcome action, waving a hand or instead of providing a verbal response. But regardless, the best thing you can do is get it in writing. If the property owner refuses to grant permission, then an administrative search warrant may be needed. So you need to present to a judge showing of probable cause, that violations have occurred, that the violation has not been cured, and that the owner has denied access. Again, throughout this process, you will be working with your attorney, law enforcement, the county, to help you along with this. So I want you to make sure that you are on a team when doing this. Because you guys are not experts in figuring out what is probable cause, and figuring out kind of what kind of notice this person needs. So it's really important to get the advice from experts. Once a township has gained entry into the property, it's important for staff or officers to document the violations of whatever nuisance you are taking issue with, whether that is written reports, photographs, videos, affidavits. That will be important, whichever method you're using to determine or enforce this nuisance ordinance or hazardous property issue. And like I said, partnerships really matter here. You don't have large staffs typically, so that means that you will need the help of the county public health department, the sheriff's office, fire officials, your township attorney, most definitely, building officials, environmental agencies. Sometimes if a property contains, waste accumulation, health hazards, county authorities have additional authority to require abatement beyond what the township can do. So it can be cheaper and easier route sometimes if they have the ability to do that for the township. But don't feel like you are alone in solving these issues. You can't solve them independently. You will need to work with other entities. All right, so to wrap it up, I will kind of give an overview, takeaways for today. Ugly is not the same as hazardous. You want to make sure that you document everything. Private property rights should be the first thing on your mind. That should be what you're concerned about, and not violating those, regardless of whether you consider the property abandoned or not. Abandoned property cases are rarely solved by a single official working on their own. You will need to work with others, and you will need to work with your attorney. These are multi-agency, multi-step situations requiring patience, and it's a really careful process. The goal isn't getting rid of the property. The goal is protecting public health and safety. And remember, at the end of the day, the township doesn't have a requirement to do anything. So you don't need to feel like you must do something. You can simply explain that you don't have the ability, that it's not a priority to those who are upset about whatever these properties are. So that is all I have for today. Here is my information if you need it. I'll leave it up there for a moment. But does anybody have any questions? I don't see anything in the chat.
Do you have a second for me, Maddie?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're ready for me, I'll just give a little information here about actually being able to post public notices at the Minnesota Newspaper Association. And this is something Maddie has talked about before, and she's given me some great information here. What we need to remember is that this was new legislation last year, and basically outline it says if no other qualified newspaper is reasonably available, you can post the notice on the township's official website and the Minnesota Newspaper Association public notices website. And also, that is once you've identified a qualified newspaper to replace the one that you have that has gone away, to get login information to the Minnesota Newspaper Association, you're going to have to register there and get that login information. You're going to go to the MNA phone is 612-232-8844 or admin@mnpublicnotices.com. And I'll throw that in chat real quickly to help you out. Thanks for giving me a couple of minutes here, Maddie. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for the information, Gussie.
You bet.
All All right. Does anybody else have any questions before we log off here? It looks like Gussie put that email address in the chat. So if that's something of interest to you, make sure to save that information. Otherwise, email Gussie or I and we can get it to you as well. All right. Well, have a lovely afternoon, everyone.